Hi guys, Jack Dallas here. I just wanted to check in real quick to touch on the Syrian civil war, a issue that I've been talking about pretty much since the beginning of this channel and the original blog I had, as well as just a topic that I think, although is still ongoing, has kind of fallen off the map a little bit, probably on purpose, from the sort of mainstream media nightly news coverage. So I'm just sort of orienting us here with a view of the map real quick. This is not going to be a particularly long video. What I'm trying to focus on right now is actually some of the various, I guess what I would call hypocritical statements being made by the US and the West right now, and how this plays into some of the observations I was making a while back. So one of the first things I want to do is just read this paragraph here. This is from an article. I guess I'm referring not really to a paragraph, but these few paragraphs. This is from an article in Russia and India Report, and I found it interesting. If I just read this here, the main issue of contention, however, remains unresolved: the fate of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The U.S. wants him to stand down, arguing that he bears responsibility for the entire conflict by waging war on his own people, while Russia insists that Syrians themselves must decide the fate of their leader without external involvement. You guys can continue the rest on your own there. Um, this kind of goes back to the beginning of the conflict, guys. I think, first of all, to call the Syrian civil war a civil war is probably about as inaccurate as it gets, just because none of these events would be occurring without external influence. Almost none of the actual influential groups are groups that rose in any sort of natural, organic political fashion. They are all kind of funded from outside. They're fighting proxy wars for countries that, are essentially in sort of secret wars with each other, i.e., West versus East, as opposed to these people in Syria versus some other group in Syria. It's not like it's two religious groups or two religious political organizations trying to fight for power. Um, Although that is happening within Syria, at the same time, my point here is that this would not be a conflict at this level without the involvement of external countries. So, not too long ago, a few events started taking place, which, in my opinion, kind of finally started to put the definite, cracks in the argument of the West when it came to the Syrian civil war. One of the first things, in my opinion, that did that was when Iran started to come into the war on the side of Assad. Now, at first, it might sound like, okay, here comes Iran, they're coming in on the side of Assad, and we're being told by the news every night that he's the bad guy. We're being told by the news every night that Iran is also the bad guy, so that makes sense. However, who is Iran fighting when they come in on the side of Assad? ISIS. And last time I checked, guys, the U.S. doesn't like them now, do they? So when you have a group, which essentially is really a country in this case, it's Iran, and it might be through Hezbollah, although Iran had its own legitimate, army and advisors on the ground as well. What tends to happen is when they're fighting a group such as ISIS, which the U.S. has stated as its main enemy, people are going to kind of sit back and go, why is that happening? Why is this person that I was told by the news is an enemy fighting the person that I was also told is the even bigger enemy? Well, it's because what it comes down to, guys, is that you have to remember why this whole thing began in the first place. ISIS didn't just come out of nowhere. There's a lot that goes into it. Their roots go back several years, but the simple way of saying where they really came from was essentially they're a proxy army funded and trained and enabled completely by the West to topple the Assad regime without the U.S. having to actually put its own boots on the ground. So the irony here comes in when, again, a group such as Iran or Hezbollah, who we're told is an enemy, comes in and decides to start shooting at who else but ISIS fighters, who of course want to topple Assad, who is the current leader of Syria, and who is going to work with the governments in places like Iran and with the leaders of groups like Hezbollah. That, of course, is where Russia comes in as well. Now, here is where the next bit of hypocrisy, in my opinion, comes in. You see articles, I only pulled this article up not because I thought it was specifically good, but just because I've seen so many articles like this, guys, coming from CNN. Right in the title, we can see the propaganda is just, dripping off of this title. Russian fighter jets enter Syria with transponders off. So of course, what we're supposed to gain, what we're supposed to feel from that article is fear. It's supposed to make you think, oh, why would they be going in with the transponders off? Are they going to attack? Is it secret? Are they trying to evade the U.S.'s radar? What are those crafty Russians doing this time? Well, this is the kind of propaganda that doesn't stand up to even 3 seconds of any kind of technical analysis, guys, because let me ask you, do American drones turn their transponders off before or after they blow up children in Lebanon? I kind of forgot to ask. Same thing in Egypt, let's see, same thing in Iraq, same thing in Afghanistan, same thing in Syria. I could sit here for the next hour and name the countries where that takes place on a weekly basis. Let me ask you something, guys. Does the U.S. turn their transponders off when they go and do secret night raids and capture people and kill entire families by accident looking for somebody who probably doesn't even exist or probably didn't even commit a crime? Does the U.S. turn their transponders off when they go to launch attacks in places that end up killing more civilians than bad guys and questionably any bad guys at all? I mean, at the end of the day, I see titles like this to articles and I just think to myself, like, man, if you just replace, Russian with American, it's all the same. I mean, why are we supposed to be fearful of Russian fighter jets fighting ISIS with their transponders off when American, drones are anonymously killing civilians literally, essentially on an hourly basis? This is the propaganda, guys, and I try to point it out whenever I can. But again, it's that whole idea of here comes Russia, and we're supposed to be scared because it's the Russian military stepping up and doing something and actually taking action. But again, guys, who are we being told they're fighting? ISIS. Last time I checked, weren't they the bad guys? This is where the American double standards kind of start to get in the way. We saw this in the first Iraq War. The stated aims of America start to come into question when actions like this are taken, simply because they're kind of able to call their bluff. America states its aim as wanting to fight ISIS, and here comes Russia like, hey, we're ready to kick ISIS's ass. Can we come in? And America's like, hang on a second. I don't know about that. Of course, the whole big issue that everybody is concerned with right now is whether or not Assad is going to stay in power if this whole thing, works out in favor of the, I don't even know what you'd call it, kind of like Russian-Iranian side, because that's the ironic twist of fate here, guys, is that if Russia comes in and if Assad continues to fight ISIS and ISIS is pushed back, okay, even if that happens with American help, well, then Assad stays in power. And America has made it very clear that they want Assad out of there. Obviously, Israel wants Assad out of there if they want to continue with the Greater Israel Project. If the pipeline interests that want to have construction go through to go and bring natural gas pipeline territory through Turkey into Western Europe, if they want to be able to keep building, they need to get Assad out of there. If Russia wants to keep its thumb on Western Europe by exporting most of their natural gas, they're going to have to keep Assad. So at the end of the day, once again, it's kind of a big question, because if America has Russia come in and help them, quote-unquote, fight ISIS, that does come at the expense of Assad staying in power if this whole thing goes, their way. So America right now is kind of being boxed out in a geopolitical sense. This next article on Yahoo I only brought up again as another example of the kind of propaganda that I see. Simply because, I've seen these quotes from American officials time and time again, referring to Russia as pouring gasoline on the conflict. We've also seen fanning the flames of war, things like that. Let me ask you, American officials, does supporting ISIS fan the flames of war? Does funding militias who essentially proselytize based on, radical politics and radical religion, but who you support because they want to take out the leaders that you want to take out, does that fan the flames of war? Were you fanning the flames of war when you lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and declared a war simply to help Israel further its goals in the region? Were you fanning the flames of war when you helped coordinate the planes that took out the World Trade Center? Was it fanning the flames of war when we gave the Nobel Peace Prize to a guy who made President Bush look like Jesus Christ? I mean, this is the hypocrisy that I think makes America look like a joke the world over, guys, and we need to start standing up to it. Now, am I coming in here and saying I'm, some kind of like supporter of Russian politics or a Putin supporter. Not really, guys. I have a lot of the same criticisms of their government that I have of ours in terms of just personal liberties and freedom. I don't believe that the existence of a government can be moral or right. So, I'm not like a Russian apologist in some way. I'm just trying to point out some of the conflicts that we have. So basically, guys, just to sum things up, we have an interesting situation playing out here because if Russia comes in and helps out Assad, they are fighting ISIS, who is America's declared enemy. However, Assad is also one of America's declared enemies, and in order to fight ISIS, if Russia has to help Assad, then they're still kind of pissing America off. At the same time, Israel wants Assad out of there. They want Syria to look like Iraq, a complete disaster, because that helps them fulfill all of their goals that they have in the region. So they're pissed off at Russia. They don't want them to help, and obviously Putin, hates Netanyahu as well. It's quite obvious every time they have a sit down. The tension is just there for everyone on display. So, you've got that whole situation going on. And now, on the other hand, you have a situation where, in my opinion, the U.S. is kind of being called out on its hypocrisy, and it's looking like a case of the pot calling the kettle black because the people that we are being told are bad, such as Russia, such as Hezbollah, such as Iran, are now turning their guns on ISIS, and they kind of have all along. It's not like they were supporting ISIS. So it, I think, is calling into question what America is really trying to do in the region, and maybe people will finally start to see this conflict for what it is. Only took a few years. So, hey guys, I'd love to hear what you have to say about Syria. This will be a topic that I continue to cover for a while, and let's talk soon. Have a good one.